So this, I promise, is the last time you have to see me sitting up here. But it's also really interesting for me to actually follow the conference through. I'm not a very good conference sitter. I tend to get very distracted and I walk in and out, but I haven't had that inclination yet. That being said, I was sitting up here, so it's quite difficult to walk in and out anyway while I sit up here. But it's been really extremely interesting, and I really enjoyed the last panel as well, which gave us some more insight in some of the challenges, you know, everyday challenges that we're facing here in Bulgaria. And I think they are typical Bulgarian and typical for many, many other countries. And so the second panel will allow us to learn a little bit from some other countries which have already tested and tried types of collective action initiative. And I think, I hope these will sort of serve as an inspiration for ideas emerging in Bulgaria. Nicola has also mentioned the idea of a high-level reporting mechanism, and also for everyone that is interested in reading up a little bit more about further examples, we do actually have a database of over 300 collective action initiatives around the world at our website. Just enter Collective Action Basel Institute on Google. You should find it quite easily. So there's a lot to read up on, quite simple descriptions. With this second panel, I'm very pleased to have two panelists with me here in the room, and I will start with them. Krauze, who is the lady who also misses her Samsung telephone, just repeating it, please bring it forward, who is a risk manager at the SJSC Riga International Airport in Latvia. So thank you very much for coming all the way from Latvia. You're also the chairperson of the board of the Institute of Internal Auditors, and as I've learned yesterday over dinner, you do a million other things. Why Anda is also here is because you've worked on a project which is called Compliance Without Borders, and I think we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. The second panelist, who's not come from quite as far, but still very good to have you here, is Gounev, who is the chairman of the Risk and Audit Committee of the Supervisory Board of SOF Connect. The two have met yesterday evening already, and you can imagine from airport to airport there were a lot of fascinating stories to share. Philippe, you also work for a range of international organizations on many sort of public policy issues in relation to governance and corruption, public administration and security. So I think you have a very wide perspective as well. I'm then moving on to Giovani Colombo, who's the Executive Director of Transparency International Italy. I think what brings you here is your many years of working for TI on business integrity projects and for other functions as well. And I think in particular we want to hear from you about the experience of Italy with Integrity Pacts and the Business Integrity Forum. And last but not least, Gaëlane Pelen. Gaëlane, can you hear me? We have an issue with Gaëlane, it seems. Can you unmute yourself perhaps, or put your camera on? Okay, I will just say who she is anyway. She's from the French anti-corruption agency, AFA, where she's in charge of international relations, but also involved. What AFA does is that they support anti-corruption policy developments. And in that sense, it'll be very interesting to see how France is taking the concept of collective action forward. I hope we will have Gaëlane with us. Gaëlane, if you do join, just don't hesitate to kind of switch your camera on so that I know that you are here. It was going to be starting with Gaëlane actually on a question, but I might just have to change the order a little bit. Giovani, I was talking about the models of collective action, which can be engagement, standard setting, enforcement. I think in France, we will see a lot of the engagement type models. In Italy, I think the Integrity Pacts are more of an enforcement focused. And again, I'm stressing enforcement, not in a sense of law enforcement, implementation mechanisms. And it'd be very interesting if you could tell us a little bit how Italy has approached the concept of an integrity pact. And also, as far as I understand, there is actually legal provisions in the Italian law. So not only just sort of a recommendation, but it's actually in the law. How did this happen and what has it changed in Italy concretely? Giovani, if you can hear us, it'd be great if you can come now.
Yes, thanks Thanks to you. Thanks to the organization of this important meeting. It's a pleasure and an honor to participate with our experience. Italian experience is a collective action for protect public resources. In Italy, it's called Integrity Pacts. Integrity Pacts was adopted in Milan in the beginning of the century, in the 20 and the 3, in a simple form that was a sort declaration of correct and honest behaviors during the tender to avoid substantial connection between companies of the same ownership and to avoid inappropriate contacts with official of the contract authority. It was a simple document, very simple but very effective, because without the delivery of this document is not possible to participate to the tender. Was in the beginning a simple declaration, a simple document created by procurement official of municipality of Milan and our past president of Transparency Italy. But then arrived the celebration of the world. Some years later, the law 119 of 2012, called in Italy anti-corruption law, incorporated a declaration of integrity pacts that I go to read. Failure to comply with signing of the integrity pacts, if contractually required by authorities, may constitute grounds for exclusion from the tender. So become a very effective, starting by simple declaration, tools for avoid incorrect, unfair behaviors during the tender. This was the beginning, and then the strengthening of the law.
Excellent, thank you, Giovanni. I'll come back to you later because my question will be about how do you then make it from signing a declaration to something that is effectively implemented, which is a topic we stressed also in the earlier panel. But I'll come back to that because I now see that we have Gaëlane with us effectively. Gaëlane, can you now hear us? We can certainly see you for now. Can you possibly unmute yourself, Gaëlane? It doesn't look like she's quite with us yet. So perhaps in that case, I do move to Bulgaria for now. Philip, you said yesterday you love your job because you're building something at the Sofia airport. I think it's a new terminal. It's a relatively new concession. And I'd be quite interested to the extent that you can share what some of the concerns or challenges in relation to integrity are and what plans you have at the board to address these, to ensure transparency and oversight, and whether you've ever thought of collective action as one of the potential avenues to address these challenges, Philip.
Yep. Thank you, Greta. We've sort of had an internal collective action over the past 2 years, trying to transform what is a very corrupt private public entity into a modern private corporation. Kind of the main forces driving these, of course, are the investment fund Meridian, which is a B Corp and manages dozens of concessions in Europe and the United States, and EBRD, which is the main investor behind the concession. And both insisted on introducing very transparent and modern governance system. The first step was to identify, to diagnose the disease, and the external audits that were done by Pricewaterhouse and Deloitte painted a very dark picture of complete lack of internal controls. We benchmarked ourselves against 10 other profitable airports in Europe, which kind of proved that about half of the employees were pretty much political appointees of some sort, and so far we've dismissed a significant number. So we started with about 2,200 employees. Now we're standing around 1,300. Some parts of the business were really overstaffed with new departments, units, positions created just to appoint people. And on top of that, the company was leaking, whether it's stealing fuel from the train station, whether it's stealing from the parking lots. The minutes we put new barriers, a new IT system, the revenues from the parking increased by 30%. Whether it's we outsourced the duty free to one of the top international Swiss companies, Giovani, which is now managing the duty free shops. Before that, the software of the duty free shops was developed by a Magnitsky sanctioned certain person with interest in the gambling business as well, but he was his software was running the duty-free shops for many years. So transforming all this with complete imitation of internal control systems, because we had an internal audit, we had a big internal control unit, we had all this, we had policies, but it was really an imitation of how they were functioning, how they were operating in practice. The internal auditor said no one really cared about what we came up as findings. So we invested in, basically the strategy was to change systems, so introducing a lot of IT systems like the ERP system, enterprise management system, or procurement IT system, or airport management system, even and starting building a cybersecurity which was close to zero. Investing in new processes, so with the help of, a lot of external help is required and a lot of investments, because if you ask people, can you develop a new code of ethics or a new anti-corruption policy, expecting someone internally to do this is complicated. So we used a lot of external help from the Big Four and from other consultants to help us make these processes work, in building new structures such as the internal audit. Our head of internal audit is here. He's still, as you said, it's a very lonely fight that he's fighting, but I think changing the culture, because even after we have more way to go, but because changing the culture, encouraging companies, because the airports was closed to a certain number of companies for many years. Like you have companies for 15, 20 years, only one company fixing the lifts or the elevators, only one company providing food, only one certain company for 15 years doing all the scanning equipment. It was, the fuel was provided by one of even the mafia companies, and changing all this, it takes time, and changing people's minds and the companies. I get so many calls, people asking me, is this tender really open that you put on the website? Is it going to be real? And it takes time to convince them that it's for real, that we are putting the tender, not only because someone is asking. And I think in reality, for a real transformation, it will take 4 to 5 years before we see and we can say, yeah, that's now, we're there. And for the public companies, for the government-owned, for the municipal-owned companies to walk this way, I think it will take a lot of effort, because I'm pretty sure that a lot of the government-owned companies, state-owned enterprises are in a very similar position.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting that you would say companies call you to say, is this a really true tender? Like, is it worth investing? But it's a good sign because it does mean that really there is potentially interested companies who would like to compete. Maybe they were also trying to hear how much they have to pay you, of course, but hopefully that wasn't what it was. I'm going to give it one more try with Gaëlane. Can you hear me now? You see to smile in response to my question. If you could unmute yourself. We may have
yes,
winner.
I'm now.
We have a winner.
Sorry.
Not a problem. Bonjour, Gaëlane. I'm very glad it worked out, and sorry for the technical issues. We've just gone ahead and started the panel, but I do want to I want to come back to France for a minute before we go to Riga, a tour d'Europe, really. And maybe, could you maybe focus a little bit on France's well-known Sapin 2 law, which requires companies to implement compliance programs, and it'd be very interesting to see how your agency engages through collective action or other forms with the private sector to promote their ability in a way to comply with this legal requirement.
Okay, thanks. My pleasure. Well, sorry, I was busy with another stuff and I didn't notice the clock was ticking because it's France, it's earlier, so I'm really sorry about that. So very briefly, as you may know, indeed in France, the Sapin 2 law had made some significant progress in the business integrity by imposing 8 measures and procedures to certain companies beyond a certain threshold, which is 100 million annual turnover and more than 500 employees. So these companies have to implement 8 measures and procedures that are aimed at preventing and detecting the commission in France or abroad of acts of corruption, bribery, let's say, or trading in influence, which we also call influence peddling. So these 8 measures, let me just present them to you very briefly, because they constitute what we call the anti-corruption compliance program. So first of all, there is a code of conduct. Then there is an internal audit system, risk map, which is the most important tool. Then we have procedures for assessing the situation of third parties, also calls that due diligence. Then we have accounting control procedures, a training system for managers and staff the most exposed to the risks of corruption and influence peddling, a disciplinary system, and a system for internal control and evaluation of the measures implemented. So these are the 8 measures that the AFA is there not only to audit, but also to advise the company with. So let me just explain, what does the audit division do? And then I will maybe talk about the advisory division, because the two divisions are very complementary in engaging the public indeed, because it's also in the public sector, but we're dealing with the private sector here today. So that's the way we engage the private sector. So we have updated our audit charter in 2022 to be more able to take into considerations the company's feedback on our recommendations in the implementation of these 8 measures. So the audits, which can lead to administrative sanctions, fines, are now conducted in 2 phases. First phase of the audit aims to ascertain the existence, the quality, and the effectiveness of the anti-corruption system deployed by the entity under audit. Regarding its risk environment, it's really it has to be a very tailored, compliance program. And for example, the risk mapping, we examine the mix to the risk mapping. It comes from the top. The top commitments is very important, but it also have to spread, through the whole company. And the company has to examine in every very service what are its most risks, So it's a very concrete tool that we examine. So at the end of the first phase, of course, we do have some recommendations that we suggest to the company. And then the second phase is there to see what progress has been made by the company. And during the provisional report, we take into considerations the observations made by the company to explain what were the improvements, what are still the progress to make, etc. So in the end, most of the companies at the end of the second phase, because we do conduct a second audit after the delay for the company to implement the recommendations we made earlier. And we're quite satisfied with the situation because most of the companies, let's say 99% of the companies, have followed our recommendations. So that's how we do to make the audits a very important tool of listen to the feedback of the private companies. But we also do some other stuff regarding the elaboration of our practical guides. Maybe I can talk to that a bit later about this.
Okay. But yes, we can probably take that a bit later. I do think that it's interesting that you combine an audit and an advisory function because, I mean, audit is usually a word that makes people scared, right? But clearly you kind of, I mean, it shouldn't, but it does. It's like when a ticket controller comes, you know you have your ticket, but you still think something is wrong, right? And I do like that approach. And I guess companies in France simply just don't have a choice, so they had to accommodate with, start living with that. But if it starts showing real outputs, and I think that's really important in this context as well, if your audit recommendations are really valuable and the companies realize that they add value to them, then I think there is obviously more interest in engaging. I'll come back to you, Gaëlane. But I just want to bring Anda in now, who's still looking for her phone. Because you have actually personally participated in a form of collective action that's called Compliance Without Borders, which is something that OECD and the Basel Institute have conceptualized a while ago. And I think I love Compliance Without Borders, I have to say personally. So could you just tell us in a few words what it entails and how did you get involved? How was the experience for you?
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to the panel discussions. And it's a great pleasure for me to be here with you all today. And I would like to share with our experience in participating in the OECD program, Compliance Without Borders. Riga International Airport was invited by local authorities to participate in this project. Afterwards, we started to communicate with Basel Institute and OECD to find out more information about this project and its implementation phases, as well as benefits. The aim of this program is to promote trust in business, to strengthen and also to modernize state-owned enterprise risk management and internal control systems, in order to improve corruption risk management. This is the main goal of this program. The program management approach involves an expert assignment from private sector and matching those experts, with state-owned enterprises, taking into consideration their priorities and needs. And Riga International Airport was a part of this program and also participated in this journey together, as I mentioned, with Basel Institute and OECD, as well as private sector company Granfos from Denmark. This was actually very valuable and unique experience for us to receive support from highly professional international experts. If we are speaking about this program, then the program consists of two main components. The first one, systems of compliance and integrity. This component is divided into three parts. First, government's arrangements, which include, for instance, strengthening the strengthening of board capacity, and also it was about I think I cannot remember the other thing, but which was also very important. I remember it. It was board oversight regarding risk management. This was a very important one. And the second part, risk management and internal controls. And it means that organizations has the possibility to strengthen their risk management, risk assessment, as well as identifying organization-specific risks. This means that OECD experts and Basel Institute experts would help to strengthen risk management in general. And the third was ethical culture, by meaning that it is possible to improve or update code of ethics or similar documents, and also to set the tone from top. These would be consultations regarding these issues. And the second component was management of specific corruption-related risks within the following topics. For instance, third parties, then bribery, conflicts of interest, and then also in procurement and contracting processes. These could be corruption-related risk areas. And therefore, we had a great opportunity to decide on priorities that could be appropriate for our organization's anti-corruption management. And the following step, as I already mentioned, was to match experts from the private sector with our company. And OECD decided which highly professional experts with appropriate experience qualifies in our case. And afterwards, the online meetings and discussions, consultations started with this private sector expert. Usually these are compliance experts which are in this project. And then our partner, as I already told you, it was a private sector's internationally well recognized company, Grundfos, which pioneers solutions to the world's water and climate challenges and improves the quality of life of people. And the company shared with experience in implementing and maintaining internal control system of the anti-corruption and conflicts of interest prevention, including also corruption risk assessment methodology and the content of the code of conduct, as well as sanction risk management approach. We were discussing about different approaches, how to assess corruption risks, how to assess sanction risks, and also we understood that it's possible to integrate in the operational risk management, but this would be other part. So yes, that means we did a great job together with private sector, I think. Yes, thank you.
I think it's a very interesting concept because it's kind of like a mentoring process, and I do think it has this peer-to-peer benefit. So you have someone who comes from the outside, but who's at the same time from the inside. So it's really we've seen huge benefits because you have practitioners speak to each other in a similar language, and they really connect in a different way. I think the role of the board in risk management will probably raise some interest in Philip as well. But in the interest of time, I'm going to go back to Gaëlane now. If you want to just basically continue where you left it. And I think what I find really interesting is that you kind of managed at AFA to move from sort of the typical, let's engage with the private sector and have a bit of dialogue, to really have a very collaborative platform for dialogue. How did you manage to get the private sector to want to do that? Or was it purely because the law said so?
Yeah, no. We don't only do audits with that, and you're right by saying that the threat of the audits is, of course, not generally well welcomed by the company, even if our audits are more pedagogical in a way than others. It's still an audit. We also do advice And by advice, I mean take into account the private sector feedback to elaborate our guidelines and practical guides. For example, the eight measures that I exposed a bit earlier are detailed in the law, but the law doesn't, specify how to achieve these objectives. So that's what AFA does. We published some guidelines, to explain all the eight measures detailed by the Sapin-II law, and very concretely, to detail how to make a risk map, how to make an internal control alert, etc., etc. So our guidelines are published on the official website, the Republic official website. But additionally to these guidelines, we also elaborate some very practical tools, which are the practical guides. The practical guides are focused on either sector, for example, it can be the prevention of corruption in sports, or they can be focused on a very process, for example, the gifts and the gifts policy in a company, or sponsorship, or that kind of very risky processes. So in order to do those practical guide, what we do is we elaborate the first version of that guide, and then we publish them on our public website, so everybody can react to our first proposal. And of course, there were some trade unions and federations that react to these practical guides to our project. And then we put in place a working group involving the most representative federations and trade unions, in order to work very concretely on the questions they raised. And then we take into account, when we can, of course, we have discussions, and then we take into account when it is feasible, their recommendations, and we even publish the statistics of the correction suggestions proposed by the most representative trade unions, in order to say, for example, in this guide, we implemented 60% of the recommendations that came through each federations or trade unions, So the practical guide is one thing. The other thing, very briefly, we also do, apart from the audits, is the surveys, to gather a more representative view of the implementation of the Sapin-II law and the 8 measures, the anti-corruption measures, because obviously we cannot audit all the companies beyond the threshold, and it's not our goal either. So we lead some surveys to assess the maturity of the anti-corruption systems. And so we made a first survey, I think it was in 2000, it was published in September 2020, so just 3 years after our existence, our birth. And we published another survey in 2022, And so the findings of this survey reveal clear progress in respondent businesses, awareness of bribery and influence peddling offenses. We also realized that there was still some room for improvement in terms of understanding their exposure to the risk of bribery and influence peddling. For example, just 6% of the respondents considered that their business was highly exposed to the risk of corruption, and 45% felt that they were moderately exposed, whereas 24% of businesses had been confronted with a case of corruption or influence peddling in the last 5 years. These are some examples of the results of the survey, which is really the tool that allows us to have a very representative view of most of the companies exposed, and who are which is important as well, is that the survey is led. We ask all the companies, all the trade unions federation, independently from their threshold, So even the companies who don't have to put in place the 8 measures required by Sapin-II law, so those are beyond the threshold. They also respond to the survey. That's why we have a very large view, on the anti-corruption implementation in the companies in the country.
Thank you, Gaëlane. I think it's an interesting combination of engagement, collaborative development, and the audit. So it's a really interesting combination of tools. We're running a bit short in time, unfortunately. So these are the 3-minute questions, just to remind everyone, unfortunately. But Giovani, I want to turn back to you, which is very convenient because basically I was going to ask you about the role of civil society and kind of making sure that, these integrity pacts are being followed. And this is one of the questions we got from the online audience, to hear about how monitors are selected, like if there are monitors, if so, how are they selected, and how do we make sure that monitors are trustworthy as well? It's a very good point, actually. So 3 minutes, Giovani, I'm sorry, tough question.
Okay. Thanks, great after origins and contribution of law, we can arrive to the heart of Integrity Pacts, our collective action. The Integrity Pacts with monitoring is the evolution of the species and arrive to cover the entire time frame of the race of the works in collaboration with civil society, because we follow with all works starting by the phase needs assessment and then the pretender activity, tender, contraction, and the execution of works with the control of time and costs. During this experience, we speak with the contract authority, with the companies that participate as in the tender, asking some during the participation of the race, and also implementation of instruments, for example, whistleblowing, anti-corruption line guide, and so on. And the contract authority must sharing with us all documents of the activity. Then we put technical staff, engineering, expert of law, of other matters, and we communicate with the 4 actors that are citizens, showing how the race, how the work are running, the respect of the rules, of the law, of the transparency, and so on. And so we open the 4th window with the citizen. Citizen can participate with the transparency and integrity issues, reading our report, but we also organize events for raising the bar of a culture of integrity with the citizen in the city where the works happen. This is the part of civic engagement, and is not only monitoring of the race of the works, but the trying to bring the culture of integrity with knowledge and awareness about integrity and transparency issues toward the citizen. This is the real great scope of the collective action.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Giovani. I think one point you made is that the monitor, or the function of monitoring, really requires expertise. It's not just because someone,
Yes.
And that is where it becomes trustworthy and credible, and also constructive in many ways, I guess, in the way that also, the work of AFA is constructive. It's not just the threat of being monitored or audited, but it really has to be constructive as well. Philippe, when you hear, this session, these examples, others, can you see potential for something like that, either at the Sofia airport or in Bulgaria, or what do you think it takes for collective action to become a trend, a positive trend in Bulgaria, 2.5 minutes for you.
Yeah, I think the main issue would be trust here, because I think if, let's say, the Ministry of Regional Development comes up with some sort of initiative, probably half of the, or the majority of the construction companies will think that it's some sort of imitating, or they're just, it's a PR stunt, and to really make them convinced that they really have to invest, I think it would probably take time or some kind of personal trust with some key players, including in the chambers of the various chambers of commerce, or at least the ones which have some kind of legitimate or kind of pure objectives, I would say. But this would be the difficulty for me. I wouldn't exclude it. I think there is, that's why I gave this example of Soft Connect, which is kind of drawing on the experience of Meridian as someone that's been introducing good governance around the world through its concessions. But there are a lot of international companies based here, and we've interacted with a lot of them, and I think public sector companies can really draw a lot of lessons, and there is probably some potential for sharing experience and drawing on the experience of the multinational corporations with established standards.
Yeah, I mean, that's a concept that's often also thought through about the third party, you know, the multinationals that have a lot of downstream partners, and how that can lead to kind of promoting a different way of behavior, although I always hesitate to kind of put the finger on the locals and all the multinationals are also wonderful, because that is not quite the reality either. But I think the example, Anda, you gave, certainly that transfer of knowledge from the private to the public sector is really interesting. I was going to ask you, did you see any impact of that program? And you've kind of answered that already, but do you want to add anything before we conclude the session, please?
Yes, I would like to tell you a little bit more about this project because we got several outputs from that. And we updated Code of Ethics, taking into consideration the recommendations of our private sector expert, and we updated 2 sections which were gifting and sustainability principles as well. We separated the chapters for combating corruption and prevention of interest conflicts. And also we prepared and approved prevention of corruption and conflict of interest policy based on OECD recommendations. We prepared the draft and sent them for reviewing and received back recommendations to update our policy. Yes, we took into consideration and we updated the policy. And the third one was that we updated the operational risk management methodology by adding sanction risks, and also we had prepared and updated our sanction risk mitigation plan. And in the end, I would encourage you to participate. I would like to encourage you to participate in this kind of program. Because it was possible to find out more what are the main drivers for private sector, for those organizations' successes, and then in combating the corruption. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anda, and thank you to the entire panel. It's never enough time, but I think we touched at least upon some of the experiences and took some inspiration away.